The desert world was wide and endless. Sand stretched in every direction like a golden ocean, and the wind moved across it in soft waves. The air was hot, and the sky shone with a pale blue light that seemed almost white in the midday sun. Mira walked ahead of the others, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She was leading a small team of explorers, and they had been searching for many days. Their supplies were running low, but she refused to give up. Her team followed close behind. Aaron carried the scanner, which gave steady beeps as it read the land beneath the sand. Lonnie kept the map and marked every step they took. Beside them, Joran dragged a cart with water and equipment. Their steps were heavy, but their spirits were still strong. They had come here with a single purpose: to find something hidden under the desert, something that old stories spoke about but no one had ever seen with their own eyes. At last, the scanner gave a different sound, sharper and faster. Aaron stopped and looked down at the screen. His voice was filled with surprise as he called out to Mira. "Something is here. A structure under the sand. It is very large." Mira turned, and for the first time that day she smiled. She raised her hand and pointed to the spot. "This is where we dig," she said. The team worked together. They set up small machines that pushed away the sand. Slowly a stone surface began to appear. It was not rough like common rock, but smooth, shaped with purpose. Strange carvings could be seen, though half of them were hidden under sand and dust. Lonnie brushed the surface gently with her hands. The carvings were unlike anything she had seen before. They showed lines of chains and stars above them. Some figures were drawn in simple forms with arms lifted toward the sky. Lonnie whispered, "These are not marks of decoration. They are telling something." Joran bent closer. "It looks old, very old. But the stone is strong. Whoever built this wanted it to last." As more of the surface cleared, the outline of a doorway became visible. The door was massive, made of stone blocks fitted so closely that not even a line of sand could pass between them. In the center of the door was a golden symbol shaped like two broken chains crossing each other. The gold glimmered faintly, though it had been buried for ages. The team stood in silence, staring at the symbol. Something about it stirred their thoughts. It was both beautiful and heavy with meaning. Mira stepped forward. She placed her hand on the golden mark. The stone felt warm under her touch, though the desert wind was hot and dry. She whispered to herself, "This is it, the tomb of broken chains." The others heard her, and the name stayed with them like an echo. With effort, they set up their tools to push against the door. It moved slowly, as if it did not want to open after so many years. A low sound filled the air as the heavy stone shifted. The doorway opened just wide enough for a person to step through. Inside was darkness. The team turned on their lamps and soft light spread across the chamber. The air was cool, almost cold, and smelled of stone and time. Dust drifted gently as if the air itself had been asleep and was waking for the first time in centuries. The chamber was wide and tall. On the walls were more carvings, clearer than those outside. They showed groups of people in chains, their heads bowed. Above them were stars drawn in careful detail. Between the figures were golden tablets fixed into the wall. The tablets were covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly when the light touched them. Aaron stepped closer to one tablet. "This is not writing, I know. It feels alive, like it is waiting for someone to read it." Mira nodded. "We will study it. But remember, we must be careful. This place is not only stone and gold. It is memory." As they walked further into the chamber, they found another doorway at the far end. Over this doorway were words carved into stone. The letters were old, but they were in a form close to the explorer's own language. Mira read them aloud. "The tomb of broken chains. Gold buried with prisoners." The words filled the chamber with weight. The team stood quietly, each person trying to understand what they had found. Why would a tomb hold prisoners? Why would gold be placed with them? The questions pressed against their minds, but none had an answer yet. Lonnie touched the wall gently. "Maybe it is not only a tomb. Maybe it is a story waiting for us." Mira turned to her team. Her eyes were steady and calm, but inside she felt a rising sense of wonder. They had found something far greater than they expected. She whispered, more to herself than to the others. "This place will change what we know." The desert outside was silent, as if it too was holding its breath. Beneath the sand, hidden for countless years, the Pharaoh's tomb of broken chains had finally been opened. And the story of those who had been forgotten was ready to be told. The air inside the tomb felt strange, like a space between sleep and waking. The explorers stood in silence, their lamps casting soft circles of light on the walls. Mira led them further in. her steps careful, her eyes fixed on the golden tablets that shone faintly like quiet stars. Each wall carried a story in carvings. Chains ran across the stone in long lines drawn with care. The figures carved into the rock had simple faces, yet their postures spoke more than words. Some stood tall with their hands raised. Others sat on the ground with their arms bound. Above all of them were symbols of suns and moons and distant constellations. Lani bent close to a wall. She brushed away a layer of dust with her hand. Beneath it, the image of a man and a woman appeared. Both had chains around their wrists, but their eyes were lifted toward the sky. She felt something stir within her chest. They were not only captives, she whispered. They were dreamers. Aaron moved toward a tablet. It was large, smooth, and bright even in the dim light. Strange markings covered its surface. They did not belong to any known language. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above it. Mira spoke quickly. Wait, we do not know what it will do. But before Aaron could decide, the tablet lit up by itself. A golden glow spread across its surface, filling the chamber with warm light. The carvings on the walls began to shine as if touched by firelight. Dust floated upward like tiny sparks, and the air hummed gently. The explorers stepped back, unsure of what was happening. Yet the light was not harsh. It was calm, almost like a song without sound. The images carved in stone shifted slowly, as though they had been waiting for someone to awaken them. The figures on the walls began to move. Chains that once hung heavy now shimmered like liquid gold. The carved people lifted their arms, and their eyes shone with new light. The explorers watched in wonder as the story unfolded around them. One wall showed rows of prisoners walking together across sand. Their chains were drawn long and heavy, yet their heads were not bowed. Above them, the stars seemed to guide their path. Another wall showed the same prisoners sitting in a circle, their hands reaching out to one another. In their touch was a glow, a symbol of hope. Joran spoke softly. It is not only art, these are memories. The stone is remembering them. The team moved slowly from wall to wall. Each carving added to the tale. The prisoners were far from home, taken from different places beneath different skies. Yet in the carvings they shared the same dream. The dream was written in the stars above them. They longed to be free, to walk among their own people again, to see the constellations of their birth. At the center of the chamber stood a wide stone slab. Upon it lay shapes that looked like beds or resting places. Around each bed was a circle of gold, as if the people buried here were honored with precious metal. The explorers realized this chamber was not built for kings or rulers. It was built for prisoners given respect in death that they had been denied in life. Lani placed her hand gently on the slab. This is not treasure for us to take, she said. This is a memory left for us to guard. Mira nodded. Her eyes followed the glowing chains that ran across the walls. They did not end in darkness. Instead, each chain led upward, drawn into the sky, broken in the middle as if to say the bond had been shattered. She felt a quiet message forming in her heart. The chains were not the end, she whispered. They were broken. The light from the carvings grew brighter, and then it shifted. On one wall, a single figure appeared, larger than the rest. It wore a crown shaped like the sun, and its hands were raised. This was the Pharaoh. Yet his image was not one of pride. His head was lowered, his arms reaching toward the prisoners. At his feet lay golden chains cut apart. Aaron spoke in awe. The Pharaoh honored them. He did not place gold for himself, but for those who were bound. The image faded slowly, and the glow dimmed until the chamber returned to stillness. The air once more felt heavy with silence. The explorers stood together, their lamps the only light again. Joran let out a slow breath. This tomb was built to tell a story, not of power but of memory. Mira looked at her team. We are the first to see this after countless years. We must listen carefully. This story is speaking to us. Outside, the desert remained quiet, unaware of what had awakened below. But inside the tomb, the explorers knew that the past was alive. The Pharaoh's tomb of broken chains was not a place of sorrow. It was a place where prisoners became more than captives. They became voices carried forward in stone and gold. The team felt the weight of this discovery. They had not only found history, they had found hope, buried with those who once looked at the stars and dreamed of freedom. And though they had been forgotten by time, their story was alive again, glowing on the walls of the tomb. The explorers rested in silence inside the chamber. Their lamps sent soft beams of light across the golden tablets, and the carvings no longer moved. Yet the images they had seen still lived in their minds. Mira sat on the stone floor, her eyes studying the crown-shaped figure of the pharaoh that had appeared and faded on the wall. She felt certain the tomb was more than a place of honor. It was a message left for anyone willing to understand. Aaron broke the silence first. Why would a pharaoh build a tomb for prisoners? Pharaohs are known for building for themselves for their own glory, yet this one left gold in memory for those who were chained. Joran leaned against the slab in the center. Perhaps he was different. Perhaps he saw something others did not. Mira stood and walked toward the second doorway. The words above it were still clear. The tomb of broken chains. Gold buried with prisoners. She traced the letters with her hand. This pharaoh wanted the world to remember. He wanted their story to remain even after his own name was forgotten. The team prepared their equipment and moved into the next chamber. The doorway opened into a long hall lined with tall stone pillars. Each pillar was carved with scenes from daily life. There were figures carrying water, figures planting seeds, and figures sitting together in circles. All of them were drawn with chains, but the chains were loose, almost falling away. Lonnie studied the carvings closely. These are not scenes of suffering. These are scenes of living. It is as if the pharaoh wanted to show that even while bound, they still had spirit. They still had strength. As they walked further, they found another golden tablet set into the wall at the end of the hall. This one was larger than the others, and it glowed brighter when their lamps touched it. Mira stepped closer and reached her hand toward it. The tablet responded at once. Golden light filled the hall brighter than before, and images rose into the air. The explorers gasped as a story unfolded like a dream around them. They saw the pharaoh sitting in a hall of stone, his head bent in thought. Around him stood guards, but they faded quickly from the image, leaving only the pharaoh and the prisoners before him. The prisoners did not kneel. They stood together in a circle, holding hands. Their chains glowed with golden light, and slowly, link by link, the chains broke apart until nothing remained but shining dust. The pharaoh watched in silence, and then he placed his crown on the ground. He bent his head toward them as if in respect. The image changed again. The pharaoh ordered builders to shape a great tomb, not for himself but for those he called the dreamers of the stars. He placed gold not upon his own throne but around their resting places. The gold was not a sign of wealth. It was a symbol, a gift of honor to those who had carried hope in their hearts. Aaron whispered in awe. He gave them the treasure that was meant for him. He turned his own power into a memory for them. The light faded slowly, leaving the hall quiet once more. The explorers stood in silence, each lost in thought. The secret of the pharaoh was not one of control or pride. It was one of humility. He had given away what was most valued in his time, not to kings or warriors, but to prisoners who had dreamed of freedom. Mira placed her hand on the wall. This pharaoh was not remembered because of his wealth or his battles. He was remembered because he chose to honor those who had no voice. Lonnie nodded. He must have known that history would forget his name. But he also knew that history would remember the story. That was enough for him. Joran looked around the hall. This is why the tomb was hidden. Not because it was meant to be lost, but because it was meant to be found by the right people at the right time. The team walked back toward the main chamber, their minds heavy with the weight of what they had learned. The golden chains carved into the walls no longer felt like simple designs. They felt alive with meaning. They were not only broken chains of the past. They were reminders for the future. Mira gathered the team near the slab. We must understand what we have seen. The pharaoh's secret was not about power. It was about choice. He chose to give instead of take. He chose to honor instead of forget. And he chose to leave a story that would outlive all names. Aaron spoke with a quiet voice. And now it is our turn. We have become part of this story. The desert above them remained calm, the sands drifting gently in the wind, but below, within the tomb, the secret of the pharaoh had been spoken once more. It had waited for countless years in golden tablets and silent stone. Now it was alive again, carried in the minds of the explorers who had come from distant stars. The pharaoh's secret was clear. Chains could be broken not only by strength, but by respect, memory, and the will to honor those who were once forgotten. And for the first time, Mira felt certain that their discovery was not only history. It was a gift meant to be shared. The explorers did not leave the tomb right away. Something inside told them there was still more to uncover. Mira looked once more at the golden chains carved into the walls. They were broken in the middle, yet they stretched upward toward the sky. It felt like the story was unfinished, waiting for them to take another step forward. Aaron pointed to a small doorway on the right side of the main chamber. It was narrow, almost hidden behind a pillar. The stone frame was simple, without gold or carvings, but on its top was a mark shaped like two links of a chain joined together. Mira gave a nod and the team entered. The passage was low and long, forcing them to walk slowly. Their lamps lit the way, showing plain walls of stone. At the end of the passage was a circular room with a high ceiling. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested a golden object shaped like interlinked chains. The object glowed faintly as if it carried its own light. The team gathered around it. Lonnie reached out carefully, her fingers brushing the surface. At once the chains came alive. They lifted into the air, turning slowly as if guided by an unseen hand. The glow grew brighter and the walls of the room lit up with moving images. The explorers saw prisoners again, but this time the carvings were different. The prisoners were working together, not to escape walls, but to lift heavy stones to build fires and to share food. Their chains shimmered but did not weigh them down. Then slowly the chains broke apart in golden sparks. The people held hands, not out of force but out of unity. Joran whispered, "The chains were never just metal. They were symbols. And they could be broken not with power but with trust." The images shifted. The Pharaoh appeared once more, this time standing among the prisoners. His crown was gone. He was dressed like them, simple and plain. He raised his hands and the broken chains formed a path of light leading into the stars. Aaron stared in silence. He chose to stand with them. He chose to share their hope. The glowing chains above the pedestal began to spin faster, projecting more scenes around the room. The explorers saw the Pharaoh ordering golden tablets to be made, each one holding the story of the prisoners and their dreams. They saw him walking beside the builders as they created the tomb. And they saw him placing the golden chains gently on the pedestal, where the explorers now stood. Mira's voice was soft but steady. "This is his message. The chains are not reminders of loss. They are reminders of strength. The prisoners were more than their captivity. They were people who stood together, and he wanted that lesson to live forever." The room grew brighter until it was filled with golden light. The chains floated higher, then gently lowered back onto the pedestal. The glow dimmed but did not vanish. It stayed steady like a quiet heartbeat. The team stood quietly, each person lost in thought. Lonnie placed her hand on the pedestal. "These chains are not for us to take. They belong here, with the memory of those who carried them. But we can carry the story," Mira nodded. "The story is the treasure, and the treasure is meant to guide us." They turned to leave the chamber, but as they stepped back into the main hall, they noticed something new. The broken chains carved into the walls now shone faintly on their own. The light followed the explorers as they moved, as if recognizing that the message had been received. Joran smiled softly. "It feels like the tomb itself knows we understand." The team gathered near the central slab once more. The chamber was calm, yet filled with a sense of quiet approval. Mira looked at her companions. The Pharaoh left his secret, but he also left a challenge: to carry this message beyond these walls, to remind others that unity is stronger than chains. Aaron lifted his lamp and pointed toward the ceiling. "Look, the chains rise toward the stars. It is not only about the past, it is about the future too." The explorers stood together, staring at the carvings above. The broken chains stretched upward into the night sky drawn on the stone. The stars looked almost alive, glowing faintly in the lamplight. For a moment, the team felt as though they were standing beneath the real heavens, sharing the same hope as those who had once been laid to rest here. Mira closed her eyes briefly. She thought of the Pharaoh, a ruler who had chosen to leave his own greatness behind in order to honor the forgotten. She thought of the prisoners who had dreamed of freedom even when bound. She thought of the chains, broken not by force but by the power of unity. When she opened her eyes, she felt certain of one thing. This is not only history, this is a guide for us. The desert above remained unchanged, its sands drifting endlessly in the wind. But within the tomb, the lesson of the broken chains shone clearly. The Pharaoh had given his voice to the prisoners, and now, across time, the prisoners had given their voice to the explorers. The chamber fell into silence again, but it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of meaning. The story of the broken chains had been told, and the explorers were ready to carry it into the world beyond the desert. The explorers stayed inside the tomb longer than they planned. Each chamber revealed more meaning, and each tablet told a part of the story. They felt as if they were walking through the thoughts of the Pharaoh himself. Mira believed there was still something more, a final piece of the puzzle. It was Aaron who noticed another hidden passage. On the left side of the main chamber, near the floor, was a small archway covered in sand. Joran cleared the entrance with his hands, and soon a dark tunnel appeared. It was narrow, but Mira insisted they go through. If the Pharaoh wanted us to understand the whole story, this must be part of it. The tunnel led them downward, the air growing cooler with every step. After some time, they entered a wide chamber shaped like a circle. The ceiling stretched high above, and the walls curved smoothly around them. At the center stood a tall stone column, and on its top rested a golden disc. The disc glowed softly like a sun frozen in time. When the team raised their lamps, they gasped. The ceiling above them was covered in carvings of stars, hundreds of them, shining faintly in the golden light. Some were grouped in patterns, while others stretched in long lines. Between the stars were symbols, each one different from the next. Lonnie's voice was filled with awe. This is not decoration. This is a star map. Mira walked slowly around the chamber, her eyes lifted to the ceiling. The more she looked, the more she realized the map was not about planets or treasure. Each cluster of stars had a mark beside it, a simple image of a person. Some had wide eyes, some had tall shapes, others were drawn with delicate hands. Every mark seemed to represent a people, not a place. The Pharaoh mapped the homes of the prisoners, Mira whispered. Each star is not a stone in the sky. It is a memory of where they came from. The golden disk at the center began to glow brighter. Slowly, beams of light reached upward, connecting the stars. The chamber filled with lines of gold that shaped constellations in the air. The explorers stood at the center, surrounded by a galaxy of light. Aaron turned in a circle, amazed. This is not just history. This is a guide. He wanted the story to travel beyond this tomb. He wanted others to know where these people came from. The explorers felt the weight of the moment. The Pharaoh had not only honored the prisoners in death, he had given a map of their origins, a way for the future to remember not only their chains but their homes. It was as if he had said, they belong to the stars, not to their captivity. Joran's eyes shone with wonder. Imagine if we could trace these stars. We could find the descendants of those people. We could tell them the story of their ancestors. Lonnie touched one of the glowing beams carefully. It passed through her hand like warm air. She smiled softly. The Pharaoh wanted them to be found. He wanted them to live again through memory. Mira felt her chest grow heavy with meaning. She thought of the long journey that had brought them here, across deserts and sandstorms. She thought of the carvings of chains, of the Pharaoh without his crown, of the prisoners who had dreamed of the sky. She understood now that the tomb was not only a monument, it was a bridge between past and future. The light in the chamber grew brighter for a moment, then slowly softened. The golden disk dimmed until it gave only a faint glow again. The star map above returned to still carvings, though the explorers could still feel its living presence. Aaron broke the silence. We must take care. If we carry this story back, people may come here for the gold. They may see only treasure. Mira nodded. Then we must be the ones to show them the truth. The gold is not wealth. It is memory. It is honor. And it must stay here. They stood in silence for a while, letting the meaning of the star map sink into their hearts. The chamber seemed alive, listening to their thoughts as if waiting for their choice. At last, Mira spoke again. We will not touch the gold. We will record what we have seen and share the story. That is the treasure we are meant to take. The team turned back toward the tunnel. As they left the star map chamber, the faint glow followed them, a soft reminder that the story of the prisoners was now theirs to carry. When they stepped once more into the main chamber, the carvings on the wall seemed brighter than before. The broken chains glimmered faintly, and the stars above them shone with quiet approval. The tomb felt less like a place of death and more like a place of promise. The Pharaoh's gift was now clear. He had buried gold with prisoners not to hide wealth, but to turn it into memory. And he had left a map of stars to remind the future that those who had been bound still belonged to the sky. Mira raised her lamp one last time toward the ceiling. We will not forget. We will carry this story to the stars. The desert above remained silent, but deep within the earth the star map had awakened, and with it, The memory of those who had once dreamed beyond their chains now reached into the future. The explorers returned to the main chamber after seeing the star map. Their hearts were full of wonder, but also heavy with responsibility. They had learned the story of the Pharaoh and the prisoners. They had seen the broken chains, the golden tablets, and the star map that linked the past to the future. But now they faced a question that weighed more than the treasures of gold before them. Aaron looked around at the scattered gold on the stone beds. "We could take some of this back," he said quietly. "The colonies would see proof of our discovery." "We could become famous," Mira shook her head. "That is not why we are here. This gold is not meant for us. It belongs to the story. To remove it would be to take away what the Pharaoh wanted to preserve." Joran stepped closer to one of the tablets. "He left a gift for the prisoners. He gave them honor. We cannot change that, but we can share the story without taking the gold." Lonnie, still looking at the carvings, spoke softly. "The gold is not the treasure. The treasure is the lesson. Unity, hope, and memory. That is what he left for us. That is what we must carry forward." Mira walked slowly around the chamber. She reached out and touched one of the broken chains carved into the wall. The golden light shimmered faintly beneath her fingers. "The Pharaoh's choice was clear," she said. "He honored those who were forgotten, and he trusted the future to understand. We have the same choice. We can respect the tomb, or we can take what is not ours." Aaron looked at her. "It is hard. Gold is valuable. It could help many people." "Yes," Mira replied, "but the story is more valuable. Gold can be used and lost. Memory and honor can last forever. That is what the Pharaoh wanted us to see." The explorers spent hours walking through the chamber again. They studied the tablets, the carvings, and the glowing chains. Every detail reminded them of the lives of the prisoners. They thought of the Pharaoh who had given away his own glory. They thought of the people who had once dreamed of freedom under distant stars. Finally, they gathered near the central slab. Mira spoke to them with quiet determination. "We will not take any gold. We will record what we have seen. We will preserve the story. That is our duty. The Pharaoh trusted us to carry it into the future. We cannot fail." Aaron nodded. "You are right. The story is stronger than any treasure. We can share it without taking anything from the tomb." Joran smiled. "Then we will become the guardians of this memory. The tomb has chosen us to be its witnesses." Lonnie looked up at the carved stars above the chamber. "The broken chains lead to the sky. The story is meant to travel, not to remain hidden. We will carry it with care and respect." Mira led her team to the equipment they had brought. They carefully began recording every detail. They made sketches of the carvings, notes of the golden tablets, and diagrams of the star map. Every observation was written down so that the story of the Pharaoh and the prisoners could be shared without disturbing the tomb itself. As they worked, the golden chains on the walls seemed to glow brighter. The light was soft and warm, as if acknowledging the explorer's choice. The chamber felt alive, filled with quiet approval. The tomb was not just a place of the past. It was a living reminder of responsibility, honor, and respect. Hours passed, and finally the team stepped back from their work. Mira looked at each of her companions. "We have done what we came here to do. We have understood the message. We have preserved the story. Now it is time to leave, but the tomb will remain, waiting for the next generation to learn the same lesson." The explorers slowly made their way toward the doorway. The golden light of the chains and the glow of the tablet seemed to follow them to the edge of the chamber. Mira felt a sense of peace. The Pharaoh's choice had become their choice. They had honored the past, and in doing so they had joined it. Outside, the desert was quiet and still. The sun cast long shadows over the sand, and the wind moved in gentle waves. The tomb remained hidden beneath the earth, its golden treasures untouched, its story alive in the hearts of the explorers. Mira took one last look at the entrance. "The Pharaoh trusted us to carry his story," she said. "We will not forget, and we will share it wisely." Aaron smiled, feeling a new understanding of what true value meant. It was not gold or fame. It was respect, memory, and the courage to make the right choice. As the explorers left the tomb, they carried with them the story of the prisoners, the broken chains, and the Pharaoh who had given them honor. The tomb remained behind, silent but alive, waiting for those who would listen with hearts open to its lesson. The desert wind swept over the sand, and the sun began its slow descent. Deep below, the golden chains shimmered softly, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest places, hope and memory could shine forever. The explorers stepped out of the tomb, the desert sun warm on their faces. Mira felt the soft wind on her skin and closed her eyes for a moment. The silence of the desert was different now. It was no longer empty. It carried the weight of history, memory, and hope. The story of the Pharaoh and the prisoners traveled with them, hidden not in gold or stone, but in their hearts. Aaron walked beside Mira, holding the sketches and notes they had made. "It feels strange," he said. "We have seen treasures, and yet the real treasure is invisible. It is the story itself." Mira nodded. "That is exactly what the Pharaoh wanted. Gold can be taken. Memory cannot. We must share it with others in the right way." Jorn looked out over the endless desert. "People will ask about the gold, about the tomb, but they must understand that the gold is not what matters. The prisoners and their courage matter. Their unity, their hope, and the Pharaoh's respect for them are what must live on." Lonnie smiled softly. "We will tell the story, and in doing so, the prisoners will be remembered. Their dreams will reach the stars once again." The explorers returned to their ship, taking care not to disturb a single grain of sand that might hide the tomb. They reviewed their notes, drawings, and records, making sure every detail was clear. Every tablet, every carving, every broken chain was documented. The star map was carefully copied, showing the paths that connected the prisoners to the constellations of their home worlds. Mira felt a quiet sense of pride. They had not only discovered a tomb, they had discovered a message meant for the future. The Pharaoh had left a legacy of honor, showing that even those who were forgotten could have their story remembered. As the ship lifted into the sky, the desert became smaller beneath them, the tomb hidden once more beneath endless sands. The golden light of the chains seemed to linger in their memory, reminding them that their mission was not yet complete. The story needed to reach others, to inspire, to teach. Over the next weeks, the team shared their findings with scholars and historians across the human colonies. The story spread quickly, not for fame or reward, but because people were drawn to the lesson it carried. Children listened with wide eyes as the tale of the prisoners and the Pharaoh was told. Adults found hope in the idea that memory, respect, and unity could overcome even the harshest circumstances. Mira watched as the story traveled. Every retelling added life to the memory, and every listener understood that the golden chains were more than metal. They were symbols of courage, of hope, and of choice. People began to see that the past could teach them how to act in the future. Aaron walked beside Mira in one of the busy cities on a distant colony. He pointed to a school where children were drawing pictures of the tomb and the star map. "Look at them," he said. "They are learning the lesson. The prisoners and the Pharaoh are alive in their minds." Mira smiled. "This is exactly what we hoped for. The story is now part of humanity. We are the guardians, but it belongs to everyone." Even at night, when the two looked up at the stars, the constellations reminded them of the prisoners' homes. Each star was a memory, a dream, a hope that had once been bound but was now free. Mira felt a sense of connection not only to the Pharaoh and the prisoners, but also to all humans who carried stories of courage and unity across worlds. Lonnie joined them, holding a small replica of the golden chains they had carefully copied from the tomb. "This is a reminder," she said. "Not of gold, but of the choice we made. We chose to respect, to honor, and to share. That is our promise." Jorn looked at the sky and whispered, "The broken chains are no longer a symbol of captivity. They are a symbol of what humanity can achieve. Even when bound, hope can shine." Mira turned her eyes to the horizon. "The Pharaoh trusted us to carry this story, and we have. Now it is our duty to continue, not just to remember, but to act with the same courage and honor in our lives. That is the promise of the tomb." The wind moved gently across the planet, carrying the sound of distant waves, soft and calm. The explorers knew that their journey had changed more than just their understanding. It had changed the way people would see memory, respect, and freedom. And somewhere beneath the golden sands, the tomb remained. Silent but alive, waiting for the next generation to understand the lesson, waiting for the story of the prisoners and the Pharaoh to continue. Humanity had learned that true treasure is not wealth, but the courage to honor others. And in that promise, the legacy of the Tomb of Broken Chains would shine forever.